Welcome back to Push Start, where today we're picking up where we left off last time as we continue to look at the games that mattered most to me while I was growing up. I'm wrapping up taking a look at my favorite Super Nintendo games. I have such a love and attachment for this system that there was no way I could fit all my favorites into just one episode. So join me on this episode of Push Start, where we dive back into the games that defined my childhood. Paperboy 2 is a game that endlessly frustrated me as a kid. It took way too long for me to realize that only some of the houses needed a paper hurled through their window. With hindsight being 2020, I have no problem admitting I had no idea how the map screen worked. Perhaps the biggest compliment I can give the game is that it's horribly addicting. I always wanted one more crack at doing things right before sliding that purple piece of plastic to turn the system off. Paperboy 2 propels you forward through a neighborhood much like the one you may have grown up in. That is, if your neighborhood had obstacles for you to contend with, like a dog in a yard or two dudes moving a giant piece of glass back and forth across the street for apparently no reason at all.
What do these guys do?
Well, their job is to walk back and forth with this big plate glass window every couple of minutes.
Maybe there was a house in your neighborhood with legit ties to the paranormal, complete with its own ghost and tombstones. The game definitely tossed in an extreme sports section with the challenging obstacle course at the end of a level as a lovely non sequitur. I always got a thrill out of hitting a jump just right and smacking down a bullseye with a well-placed newspaper. There's next to no depth in Paperboy 2, but honestly, does that really matter? It's a super well-designed game that controls great and keeps you coming back for more chances to earn a newspaper cover singing your praises. Shmups have been a long-loved genre of mine. I spent countless hours with genre gems like Gunbird 2, the Dodonpachi series, and Gigawing. The game that started it all, however, for me was Darius Twin on the Super Nintendo. It's funny looking back because now I almost can't stand to play a horizontal shooter. I always preferred the vertical ones. Something makes sense in my head where enemies attacking from the top down feels way better in some strange way. Darius Twin was a game I went to almost every time I can get my hands on it, as it was a perfect palate cleanser between a long grind session in Mario RPG or a frustrating defeat in Street Fighter. Plus, it had the added feature of being an excellent couch co-op experience. Truth be told, I get a huge kick out of the fish-themed enemies, which is a hallmark for the series. As a kid playing the game, I never got to the end, but I certainly handed out some galactic amphibian justice. I'd make it halfway through the levels and eventually flame out. I love that you can choose your own path. You don't have to play the same levels every time you play the game. A few years ago, I placed the game onto my Super Nintendo Classic and fired it up on a random Saturday morning. I think at this point, I hadn't actually touched the game in probably 5 to 6 years. I was on an absolute roll. I felt unhittable. I was juking and jiving my ship through wave after wave of enemies. Eventually, I made it farther than I'd ever had before in my childhood. I thought for sure that this was going to be my time to finally beat one of the most memorable games of my youth. Yeah, that didn't happen. I crapped out before making it to the final level, and I haven't been able to match my performance that day since. Some games just aren't meant for me to finish. Maybe that's part of the reason why I keep coming back for some of that sweet fish laser action.
Mom, Dad, how would you like me to build a new house for you? On the ocean, with a view. And fly you to Paris so you could eat snails for lunch. I could do it with Mario paint. I'd crown you king and queen. Have servants scrub the tub. I'd paint your portrait and write you a song. Mom and Dad, best darn parents a kid ever had.
Mario Paint, the power to create, only on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
I'll put you on TV.
At this point in time, even if you were never exposed to Mario Paint back when it was released, you've probably at least heard of it. It may be the only edutainment game that I played when I was not in a school setting. I don't have an artistic bone in my body when it comes to drawing or painting, but I spent so much time with this game. I'm sure part of it was the novelty of the hard plastic mousepad and the just close enough to the real thing mouse that you needed to control the game. Actually, is this even a game? It's more like software, to be honest. Mario Paint allows you to color in pre-drawn photos, arrange music, and swap flies like no one's business. I would say at this point in time in 2021, the game is most known for the rudimentary music composer. Search on YouTube and you'll see countless covers of popular songs, all made with Mario Paint's music arranger. Some of the pre-made tracks are still burned into my brain to this day. I didn't spend a lot of time with the music stuff as a kid, but I certainly enjoyed changing everything to only make pig noises. Mario Paint is certainly an odd release, but it didn't come out of left field. Nintendo had made plenty of educational products that included Mario. I actually learned how to type using Mario Teaches Typing. For part of my childhood, I attended a very small Catholic school that somehow looked its way into a really advanced computer lab for the time. We were all required to take weekly typing classes, and their software of choice was Mario Teaches Typing. So I was no stranger to Nintendo's Scholastic side, but to be honest, I'm not sure I learned anything playing around with Mario Paint. I just wanted to hear pig noises and color Mario's overalls purple. While I spent a good portion of my formative years in arcades, most of my area didn't have much pre-1990. Sure, there was the occasional Pac-Man cabinet and maybe Galaga or Space Invaders, but a lot of the hits of the 1980s had been long replaced by the popular titles of the day. My first real exposure to those games was through Williams Arcade's Greatest Hits. It was a multi-game cart featuring Sinistar, Defender 1 and 2, Robotron 2084, and Joust. While Defender didn't quite grab me, I did over the years learn to appreciate the game. However, Sinistar, Robotron, and especially Joust became childhood addictions. My love for Robotron continues to this day, as I'm still a sucker for twin joystick shooters, a whole genre that owes much of its existence to Robotron. Sinistar had such a great personality for a classic game with how the titular villain taunted you throughout your play session. An arcade not far from my home has an original Sinistar cabinet, and it's always a treat to hear its threats as you approach the machine. Joust, though, definitely became my go-to. Unfortunately, I think all my playtime with the game was on the Super Nintendo with its controller. It didn't matter that I didn't have the joystick, the pure rush of the gameplay translated regardless. I love timing my mounted bird just right to get enough speed and elevation to crash like thunder and lightning itself in a perfect moment to take out an enemy. That kind of precise gameplay, where lining up your move just right, is still rare even to this day. It's not to say that Joust is a better playing game than the other titles, but few give that thrill the perfect moment like Joust does.
Seen a rash of these lately. TMK.
TMK.
Too much Kirby.
Think you can't get too much of a good thing? Try new Kirby Superstar. It's full-blown Kirby, inflated with 8 Kirby games, bloated with 23 Kirby enemies, bulging with new Kirby powers.
Get him into observation.
New Kirby Superstar, only on SNES. Can your system handle it?
Kirby Superstar might be one of the best value propositions in video game history. The single Super Nintendo cartridge contains 7 games in one. Sure, none of them were super long or deep, but I have to imagine parents in the 90s loved telling their kids, hey, we just bought you 7 games, so don't expect another one anytime soon. If you adjust from inflation from 1996, the game would cost you about $120 today. That's a bargain at only $17 per game. All kidding aside, Kirby Superstar was pretty much everything a hardcore Nintendo or Kirby fan could want. Each game was bright and colorful with a fantastic amount of powers that Kirby could absorb. A personal favorite of mine is the screen-clearing microphone that, when is used for the final time, Kirby turns full-on Sex Pistols. Nintendo, I am begging you, give us a punk rock Kirby amiibo, you cowards. As a kid, I definitely honed in on a couple of the games. I had a bizarre obsession with one of the two mini-games, Megaton Punch. Kirby pairs up against an opponent in a competition to see who can break through cement blocks. If you time it just right, you can crash all the way through a star and shatter your whole world in half. Maybe I just watched that movie Sidekicks a little bit too much. Another game mode that caught my friend group's attention was Gourmet Race. I guess you could consider it the spiritual predecessor to Air Kirby. It was a racing game through a traditional Kirby level that required you to run and float through as fast as you could. It definitely led to some seriously heated moments. A lot of games we played as kids just don't hold up today. Technology in video games has increased so much in a short period of time that sometimes it's hard to go back to a game that doesn't control as smoothly as you would like, or sometimes it's purely a superficial hang-up, as it's not always fun to play an ugly game. However, Kirby Superstars has and always will be an amazing title. It truly shows what Nintendo can do when it's firing on all cylinders. It's a breath of fresh air now, just as it was 25 years ago when the game released. While obviously you want to remember games that have great gameplay that keep you coming back for more, sometimes the games that stick out the most are the ones that had a unique look, whether it was good or bad. As much as I love the way Joe and Mac plays, and believe me, it truly is a fantastic title and sense of gameplay, I may love the game's art style even more. The tide has certainly turned for me over the past decade, but even up to the 360 and PS3 era, I strongly preferred a beautiful 2D pixel-based game to a struggling to look somewhat normal 3D game. When Final Fantasy made the 3D jump for the 7th installment on the PlayStation 1, I reluctantly went along with it, but couldn't get through the game. It was just too ugly for me. Honestly, I skipped a lot of classic PS1 and PS2 era games because they just looked awful to my eyes. But I guess I also have to admit that a big reason why I skipped over these games was a crippling Unreal Tournament addiction. Joe and Mac just had that certain something about it, a quality you can't quite put into words. The sprites were big and detailed, the prehistoric setting allowed the devs to play around with fantastic color schemes, from the gorgeous blue skies and lush grass of the opening level, to the stages filled with water, and of course the iconic volcano stage. I played the hell out of Joe and Mac growing up, and as an adult I finally got my hands on the other titles in the series, Lost into the Tropics and Congo's Caper. To me, it was the games that defined what made the Super Nintendo special. Beautiful games that also played beautifully. It's rare to get both in a title, but Joe and Mac definitely brought the best of both worlds.
When is too much too much? To find out, we crammed everything into Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. 60 more levels, massive enemies, huge Yoshi tricks, all served up with the latest graphic technology, Morphmation.
No more.
Sure you don't have room for another little bonus level? Super Mario World 2, only on the Super NES. Still the big one.
For the most part, every genre has a single game or franchise that reigns above all others. The ones that blaze the trail and set the standard for everything to come after it. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the Mario games have been, and may always be, the best the platforming genre has ever had to offer. I'll be honest, for most people on the Super Nintendo, the one they'll gravitate to is Super Mario World. Don't get me wrong, the game is a stone-cold classic. I don't think I really appreciated it though until I was much older. For me, the platformer of choice in the 90s was Yoshi's Island. The amazing platform jumping mechanic mixed with the aiming/shooting egg mechanic made for a game that played like nothing else out there. Yes, the game has been torn to shreds over the years for the horrific crying that occurs when Baby Mario is separated from Yoshi, but it's honestly not as big of a deal as so many make it out to be. Yoshi's Island has an amazing look to it. Every level looks like it was painstakingly created by top-tier artists in Nintendo's repertoire. It very much has a storybook look and feel that carried throughout the Yoshi's franchise going forward. Much like Kirby, I feel like Yoshi has always been targeted towards a younger audience, especially when you factor in more recent games like Woolly World. Yoshi's Island has so many amazing characters and levels, from Touch Fuzzy Get Dizzy and the Baseball Boys to the Bert the Bashful and Salvo the Slime boss fights. Between the gameplay, look, and music, I think it's fair to say that Yoshi's Island has earned its place in the upper echelon of Super Nintendo games. In my opinion, it's up there as one of the best platformers of all time, but also, I think if I was hard-pressed to make a top 50 games ever list, I feel like it would find its place. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Push Start. We've made it through the Super Nintendo portion of my childhood. Leave a comment below with your favorite Super Nintendo titles and what they mean to you. Next time we're going to be branching out and away from Nintendo. I want to thank you as always for watching, and we'll see you back here next time.